Everybody, welcome back to the Restored to More podcast. We are so excited to have you here today. And we are pumped because we have Ashley and Asher Sears sharing their story, diving into God's work and the recovery, the restoration they have. I'm going to let Charity tell you a little bit about them.
After coming out of a terrible season in Ashley Sears' marriage, her and her husband, Asher, embarked on a journey to finding out what it looked like to live more vulnerably. After learning about her husband's pornography addiction, a battle he had been fighting for years, God laid it on her heart and her husband's heart to step out of fear and start sharing their story. As the organization Stories Unveiled grew, the women that wanted to live unveiled grew as well. Today, Ashley hosts events to give women a platform to share their stories of redemption and hope. She also coaches one-on-one to help women walk through finding purpose in their pain and living in freedom from their past. Welcome, Ashley and Asher.
Hey guys, thank you.
We're so, yeah, of course. It feels weird. We were talking off air because we do all of our podcasts on Zoom now because of COVID and such, but you guys are like 20, probably 25 minutes away from us.
If that even, yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
I remember we have a neighbor and that we had just met a couple months ago since moving here. And he's like, hey, you guys have to go listen to Pure Desires podcast and you have to hear this couple's story. They live in Idaho. They're like neighbors to us. You need to go listen. And so right away I was like, oh my gosh, who are these guys? And so then we listened to your story and we're like, wow, what an incredible testimony, story of hope, restoration. We got to have you on the podcast. So
how cool is that?
I know, isn't that awesome? So cool. So you guys are reaching couples and individuals in the Treasure Valley.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
So I know that we've had a chance to dive into your guys' story a little bit based off we've talked about, did a little meet and greet. But for our audience that doesn't know your guys' story, why don't you guys kind of give us a summary of where you went through and kind of where you guys are at today?
Okay.
You want me to start? Okay. Let's see. Well, so actually, so as it starts out, 17 years ago, actually, I was married once before, and I was a young man, and I would actually say that was a product of my sexual addiction before I even knew that that's what I had or that it was even a thing. And so that to keep it somewhat concise, that marriage ended. I did have a son from that marriage, and he's now 23. What year are we in? 23 years old. Yeah, so that's crazy. Anyways, so I was a single man between, had been divorced for a couple of years, and my sister actually got a job at a restaurant that I was a patron of, and Ashley was her trainer. And so my sister told Ashley that, hey, oh, how funny, your name's Ashley, my brother's name's Asher, you guys should meet. And we eventually did.
Sounds like enough. That's like a good qualification.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. We've had people ask us if that was planned. Literally, people have asked, was that planned? I was like, who arranges marriages these days?
Seriously, that's hilarious.
That's great.
Yeah. And so I was a single guy. I was on the dating scene, as it were, and I just Ashley and I had, I don't know, sort of become friends. I'd go in and give her a hug when I'd come into the restaurant, and I'd given her some recommendations on she was going out of town, and so anyways, but I finally realized that, hey, I'm not a play the field, date lots of women kind of guy, and I was just fed up with the scene, and at the time I didn't know Christ. I wasn't in the church. I wasn't following Christ, and I didn't have a relationship with God. And so now I could say that it was God that prompted me, but at the time I just thought, you know what? I'm done with all this. I want to ask Ashley out. And so I did it. I went and I asked her out. And yeah, and then had to promptly cancel on her.
Yeah. So small disclaimer. If you want to put this in the podcast or not, it's totally up to you. But yeah, so he asked me out, and long story short, he called me, asked me to go out on a date that weekend, and promptly a few hours later, but that same evening, called me back and canceled on me and said, "I'm so sorry. I'm actually going to cancel." He says, "I forgot it was my dad's birthday and I'm going out of town."
You're like, good excuse, Betty.
Yeah, that is,
I was like,
legit.
how do you forget that it's your dad's birthday and you're going out of town? That's like a big, like, you're leaving town, you're packing. Like, how do you forget that you're leaving town and you asked me on a date? I was so mad.
Now, was that legit? That's what I want to know. Like, was that legit?
No, it was totally legit.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
I didn't think it was for the whole weekend. So what happened is he left town, and his sister, who I was working with, she didn't, because she was scheduled and she couldn't get out of it. She couldn't get out of it. And so he left town and was gone, and he said, "I'll call you when I get back into town on Sunday." And I said, "Yeah, okay." I was like, whatever. Well, I worked with his sister that Sunday, and he still hadn't called me. And I finally just kind of broke down and asked his sister, and was not broke down emotionally, but just was like, "Oh, fine, I'll just ask her." And I was like, "Is your brother really out of town? Is it really your dad's birthday?" Like,
yeah.
You know, and she goes, yeah, anyway, she told me, she goes, "I was supposed to be there, but I couldn't get the weekend off. I couldn't get it covered." And I was like, huh, okay.
All right. Okay, maybe we'll give him a second shot.
He called me that night, and we went on our first date that night.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well, hey, way to go. That worked out. And honestly, it worked out.
The way I tell the story is that I was so excited and worked up to ask her out that everything else fell away, and I forgot about everything else. And that once she said yes and it settled in, I went, "Oh crap." So
I feel like that makes perfect sense, actually. Like, especially as a guy being like all flustered, and it's like,
yep.
When do you want to go out? Saturday? Saturday works? Yeah, Saturday's great. Okay, great. Let's go. Okay, great. And then you hang up like, "Oh crap, I totally blew it." Yep. You know what I mean? So I can see that. That's not that unrealistic, for sure.
Anyways,
well, let's keep going. Obviously, a lot more has happened since then.
Yeah.
Married.
We'll just say we fast forward, we moved in very quickly together. Like I said, or like he said, he has a son. His son was 6, and when we moved in together, and we ended up finding out we were pregnant with what is now our 15-year-old daughter after 10 months of dating. So we had been together 10 months, but we'd been living together for like 7. And we found out we were pregnant, and we got married 6 days later.
Wow.
We did fall in love fast.
Oh yeah.
We had been in love. We had talked about getting married. We had talked about not doing it the same way he had done it before with his previous wife, which was the same way we ended up getting married, was pregnant. But God had a plan, and it's crazy because I think we both can, but I'll speak for myself. I can for sure look back and see God's plan in all of this. But at the time it was like, so I was 22. I was young, and this was not at all how I had envisioned. I did not envision getting pregnant before I was married. I did not envision getting married while I was pregnant. And, you know, having a wedding, being super nauseous with morning sickness. And it wasn't at all what I had in mind at a wedding chapel in downtown Reno, Nevada. Like, that's just not what we had in mind, or what I had in mind, at least. But we did it. And a year later, we had a big wedding after our daughter had been born. At least we had a bigger wedding on our anniversary. And we're coming up on 16 years married, 17 years together. In
2 weeks from today.
In 2 weeks.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Congrats. That's awesome.
So, yeah. But like he had said, he was not a believer. Not even when we got married.
Nope.
No,
it was
he
months
wasn't.
after.
Yeah, he wasn't a believer even when we got married. And my parents were on their knees. They will tell you to this day, if you don't believe in the power of prayer, then talk to me, because I grew up in the church. I grew up a Christian. I grew up a very conservative Christian, a denomination of Christian. But that was all I knew. And he did not. I mean, really the complete opposite. As a matter of fact, when we were dating and we talked about meeting the parents, because we were starting to get serious right after we had moved in together. And I had to tell him, my parents are Christians, just so you know, like, I don't really practice. I'm not really going to church, because I wasn't really when we met, which is what allowed our relationship to work, honestly, for him at that point in time. But I had to like warn him, my parents are Christians, just so you know. I hope that's not like off-putting. And he told me, as long as they don't try and convert me, we'll be fine.
No Bible thumping.
No Bible thumping.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, okay. And they didn't. Did they ever?
No. In fact, it was just the opposite. In fact, being a Christ follower for as long as I have been now, it was to me the model of how you witness Christ to others, because we would just talk, we'd have conversations, and I'll say that it's funny how we can look back and, like she said, see how God was working. I could see how God was then working, moving in me, causing me to question and to seek. And so I had been seeking through different things. I'd actually had started going to a Bible study with a friend of mine that I worked with who was a Jehovah's Witness. And I eventually, after a couple of weeks of that, I could feel that it just wasn't for me. It wasn't what I was looking for. And they were great people. I loved them. And I just told them, thank you so much, but I think, this isn't for me. And so I was seeking, all that to say, I was seeking the Lord. And and I didn't even know it. But we would do, and we still to this day do, Sunday family dinners with her parents. And but at the time we would all kind of hang out in the hot tub and spend that time together. And then her and her mom would get out and go start getting dinner together and stuff. And then her dad and I would just sit in the hot tub and talk. And I would have questions and he would just answer. He never forced his faith upon me. And it was just through that just loving me that it brought me that much closer. And then one day he called me up on the phone and he said, hey, Peggy, that's her mom's name, Peggy and I are going to go to check out this church in Sparks, and we were just wondering if you wanted to join us and check it out. And I said, yeah, why not? I'll ask Ashley. And she didn't have any issue with it. She had, like she said, grown up in the church. And so going to church, and especially now that we had a baby daughter,
sure.
I'm sure she had felt the tug to get back into church, and we went. And I remember feeling like the pastor was talking about me. And I remember turning and asking, like, did you guys tell this guy about me? Like,
this is set up.
Yeah,
did
you let him know I was coming? And they were like, no. And so it was just that brought me closer, and I eventually gave my life to the Lord and was baptized.
Wow.
Such a beautiful pursuit.
It was actually pretty great. And it's funny, as a side note, we tell our teenager will be 16 in a handful of months, and we tell her, I married a non-believer as a believer, even though I wasn't walking with the Lord. I never denounced my faith. I never walked away from the Lord. I just wasn't as close to him as I had been in other parts of my journey. And we constantly tell her, God wants for your life to marry a believer. And she's like, yeah, but you didn't. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't always happen.
Do as I say, not as I do.
I swear that doesn't always happen. Like, because we also have a story of strife and hardship. And obviously what we're going into and what we're talking about today is we have so many other parts of our story that God, intends for you to be on the same page in that respect, and we weren't when we married, and so therefore we had a lot of struggles, especially early on. So
it's a great segue. It's a great segue into some of that, Ashley. Talking about that, our listeners can obviously read more about your story on your website and all that you've done. But shed some light on that, would you? You guys got married, and you had some history that very much impacted your relationship.
Yeah. So, so I guess a quick little synopsis back, like history on me. I have some sexual abuse and trauma, I guess you could say, in my past. And he knew that going into it. And I didn't know really a whole lot. I knew a handful of things from his previous marriage, some things that he had dealt with and whatever, but it was all very in the past. It was all very past tense. And so also, as we mentioned, I was pregnant. And so it was very much like, hey, your dad wants to know when we're getting married was kind of how my dad went to him after everybody found out I was pregnant. And so we got married very quickly, and I didn't know a lot, I guess I'll say. I learned a lot more later. And so we'll kind of fast forward to our daughter, who I was pregnant with when we got married, was a year and a half, maybe. Gosh, maybe even younger than that. I don't remember. But we were sitting in the living room of our little tiny house that we lived in Reno, Nevada. And he was clicking through the channels, and I was on the floor with our daughter. And we were just playing together, and the television was on in the background. I mean, it was, normal, but he had flipped to a Victoria's Secret runway fashion show. They don't do them anymore, to the best of my knowledge, but they used to do.
I think they still do. Okay. I just don't think we just don't watch them.
We just don't watch them. Okay, well, yeah. See, a whole different world. It's a whole different, like,
we
focus on so many different things now. But anyways, it much like a Miss America or a pageant of some sort. Yeah, Victoria's Secret used to or would host these fashion shows, and so they, as you can imagine, were scantily clad on the stage and whatnot. And I remember feeling, however many months postpartum, really uncomfortable, having had a baby. Charity, I'm sure you, multiple babies, you understand, you get it. You're like, yeah, that's not how I look. And so I was
not as perky, a little more flab.
For sure. And I just remember sitting there. It was not even on my radar, anything sexual at that point. It was purely like, I don't like how I feel right now looking at this. Like, I don't, regardless of anything else. So there was twofold. It was, I don't like this. I don't like how I feel. And then it was, even as young as our daughter was, I didn't like what I was seeing, and the message, big or little, conveyed to our small daughter that this is what beauty is, or that this is what communicates beauty. And so I feel like I politely asked.
I'm sure it was. It was a long time ago.
I asked, hey, can we turn this off? And he said no.
So I had, since the time I was a young boy, the house I grew up in, and I'll put the disclaimer out there. My dad did the best that he could with what he knew, the tools that he had, and he came from a broken home, and he worked hard to provide a better life for his kids than what he grew up with. But he didn't have the benefit of a relationship with Jesus, and so it was. What he thought was the best course for raising a son was, girls and sexualization of women. And so, and he would, there were times where he was overly affectionate with my mother in front of us. There were times when he pointed out girls saying, look, son, bogey at 6 o'clock, or I guess it wouldn't be 6, it'd be 3 o'clock. Anyways, regardless. And then, he worked in marketing. And so he would, in casino marketing, and he would have these junkets where they'd bring in the Raiderettes, the cheerleaders and stuff. And so he'd bring home posters and calendars of, scantily clad women and stuff. And he thought that's what was best. And so it generated this lifestyle of sexualization. And it started young, and then as I got older, I into my early teen years, I discovered pornography, and to me that was just the next step from what I had already learned growing up early, and so then now, and then okay, so partly the reason why my 23-year-old son is on this earth is because my main conquest was sex. And I met a woman who I obliged, as it were. And so so that was my focus through the whole time. And I didn't know anything else, and I didn't know that it was wrong. And so then now we fast forward, and I've got my lovely young wife and my baby daughter, and she wants to turn this thing off, and I wanted to watch it, and I didn't see anything wrong with it.
And mind you, we had been going to church. He had been saved at this point.
Baby Christian. Very early.
I mean, months.
Early.
Yeah. And I thought, as a good Christian wife, the best thing to do would be to Bible thump him. The best thing to do would be to give him all the scriptures in the Bible, to not do, like, to not, you lust with the eyes, and it's, it's just as good as an affair, and, or whatever, like all these, in hindsight, obviously, we've learned so much, like so much about how to approach each other, obviously. But I didn't think it was an issue at this point. I was just mad that he wouldn't turn this off. I was just mad. And really what him saying, no, I don't want to turn this off, turned into was words and an argument, and, all to find out that he actually struggled with pornography, that he actually struggled with this. And so him saying he didn't want to turn it off was honest. He didn't. And so even though it started a very hard 10 plus years of our marriage and his addiction and this struggle, it was the first time any light had been shed on his issues, because I really didn't have any clue going into our marriage or our relationship that this was an issue, and that it had been an issue for decades.
Well, and in all fairness, I didn't know it was an issue either.
Right.
It was just normal to me. It was just all the rationalizations of all guys do it. All guys look at this stuff. It's just what guys do. It's not a big deal. Who's it hurting? It's not about her. I love her. She's beautiful. It's not about that. And so yeah. So it was that was the beginning of an understanding for me as well of, like, oh, okay. So I've entrusted my life to Jesus, and now I'm finding out, oh, this isn't a good thing. This isn't okay. And so, that started my journey on figuring out what it looked like, and so.
And just as a slight disclaimer, what's interesting is on our journey and my journey as the wife, and talking to so many women, and mentoring young women whose husbands struggle with this, and finding other spouses who are in my position, having a relationship with Jesus doesn't make this good or bad. It's never good. Like pornography never strengthens a marriage, regardless of where you stand religiously, or what your belief is. It never strengthens a relationship. And so that's what I've also come to find out, is wherever anybody is on the spectrum of whether you believe in Jesus or you don't, or what your affiliation is, your denomination, or if you have one at all, there's better ways. There's another way, for marriage, and this isn't it. So sex and pornography addiction. So
what I hear you guys saying is like, it's damaging regardless to a relationship. Yet at the same time, now because you're following the Lord, Asher, you were convicted. You were feeling a conviction because you wanted to serve Christ and you wanted to show him you loved him. So now it was like, okay, now I know this is not something that I want to be part of my life because I want to, be a believer. What did that journey look like for you? Did you hope and pray that God was just going to like magically take it away from you? What was that? Because that is a lot. There's a lot of stories that are like that,
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I would say mine is one of them. I think that I would have to say that in the beginning, though, like after this episode with us in the living room and the television, it was like a out of sight, out of mind thing for a while, and it didn't really rear its ugly head for us again for a while. And truthfully, I don't have a strong recollection of what the path of addiction was for a while there. But it was back in the dark, and I was continuing to live the lifestyle. But now the problem was that I knew that it wasn't okay, and so it led to shame, and hiding. And so instead of being able to openly turn this stuff on the television or whatever, I then internalized it and took it and hid it in the dark. And for Ashley, she didn't know. She just thought that it was okay. Things were good. We'd had the conversation, and she didn't see any more outward appearances of it for a while. I think that she'd be able to probably recall better some episodes that happened previous. But I would say that until we moved to Idaho, there wasn't really any, it was just kind of status quo. Things were good. There was no issue. I was
going to say there was no outward issue.
Yeah.
Because he was still, it was 3 kids later, we had our teenager, and we have 2 other boys. And so during this whole time, we lived in Nevada, and it was status quo. And I think I was really naive in the beginning. I legitimately, with my whole heart, thought that as long as I told him this is wrong, you can't do this anymore, I don't like this, be done. I legitimately thought that was that. That was the last conversation we were going to need to have about it. I legitimately thought that. In experience, my age, I don't know, but I just really thought that we were good, and we just had a couple more kids, and life was stressful as a blended family, which is what we were. And but the pornography thing never really reared its head, like he said, for a while. I think we struggled on and off, but I never chalked it up to that. I think it was always his internal struggle that he was battling on his own, and I just thought it was like normal marriage stuff or whatever. And then we moved to Idaho 9 years ago next week. So we've been here for a little while now, but when we moved to Idaho, I would say our first year, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he started kind of slipping into, he had talked about his dad was maybe overtly inappropriate in front of them as children.
Mm-hmm.
And he really started going down that road. And I felt like we're married. Really, we're married. Anything goes essentially. But I feel like there's a line, right? And we have 3 little kids. And there were some things that I was incredibly uncomfortable with. And I just would tell him, listen, I'm your wife, but I'm not an object. And I'm your wife, but I'm not your property. And, so we would have these conversations, and it started to get bad actually after we moved here, and we struggled for years, on and off. And we went to, he went to a 12-step Christian recovery group.
Well, and I'm gonna insert just a little bit of detail in there as well. So yes, things were getting bad. I was outwardly, being inappropriate and doing these things because I, could justify it. I thought, oh, the kids, they're small, they won't know, they don't know what's going on, and this is whatever. And she had turned to me and was like, we're done with this. Like, you need help. You have a problem. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, okay, all right. Well, it was a big slap in the face, not figuratively, right? But and that's when then I was like, okay, I need to find something. And I looked and I sought out and I found a program that was just blocks away at a church. And previous in our life back in Reno, there were friends and pastors that had talked about their struggles with sexual addiction and stuff, and pornography addiction, and how it had affected their marriages, but how they found healing and through talking about it. And these guys were so brave and so bold as to talk about it from the pulpit stage.
Yeah, totally.
And I still felt like there's no way I could share this, because what are they going to say? What are they going to do? I'm going to not be able to serve in the children's ministry anymore, any of this stuff. So I never felt okay sharing it with anybody until I found this program, locally. And that was the first time that I was with people that I didn't know, that I felt like, I was anonymous. And so I could share this because nobody knew me. And that was the beginning of the journey of healing. I eventually stopped going to that because I was tired of not having my Friday nights with my family, and I felt like I was good. I was in a better place. And so, yeah.
And honestly, I was tired of him being gone on Friday nights, having we had little kids at this point. Our kids are a lot older now and basically take care of themselves. But I was tired of having him gone. And again, I will still say, even 8 or 9 years ago, I was of the mindset that figure it out, you figure it out, and we'll be good, and we can move past this.
Yep.
And it hasn't been until pretty recent, the last 4 or 5 years, that I've really this is a journey. This is our life. This is our life. But that's okay. It's not like, oh, we're doomed to this or whatever. This is the story that God's given us. And this is what we will talk about and do and deal with for the rest of our lives. And it will be our ministry and it will be our testimony. So I know I'm getting emotional.
And everybody can see
that. No, that's a powerful transition. I think the acceptance piece is really hard for all of us.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, for me, when I joined different recovery programs, I was like, okay, so how fast can we get this done? How fast can it take? You say it's a 12-month program. Well, watch out. I'm going to get done 6. And then I'm going to go ahead and move on. And, I'm never going to see you guys again. And we're going to be good. And, and God had a different plan for sure. And it's really hard. It was hard for me to accept that big time. Like, it really hard for me to be like, wait, what? Like, what? And it doesn't mean you're always stuck where you're at in the very beginning, for sure. But it means that it never just leaves your story. It's not like, being previously married isn't like omitted just because you get married the second time. It's still part of the story. Having one child and one relationship, having another, it's like, you're like, I don't even want to erase that, but it's like, it's a part of the story. And this will forever be a part of our story too. The question is, do we own it and talk about it and then help other people get rid of the shame? That part blows my mind. And it's so true, Ashley. Like, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think there's a lot of people that relates to that. There is no quote unquote shame as a non-believer doing things that are inappropriate. There just isn't the conviction. It might still be damaging. We might still have, negative side effects of unwanted sexual behavior. We might be, might feel super lonely. We might feel a lot of anxiety. We might feel depression. We might have, even sexual things that happen to us, whether it's disease or erectile dysfunction or all this stuff. But that shame piece is at the core of who we are. And I don't think there's any need for shame if we're not walking with the Lord. And the minute we give our life to the Lord, we have this enemy of our soul. It's like, you are a terrible person. And you like never felt terrible before. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, am I this horrible person? And it's this belief that, oh my gosh, now I'm a terrible person. You know what I mean? And I'm grateful you shared that, because I feel like that's a reality for so many of us, that the battle of shame can be even greater than the battle of lust, the battle with pornography. A lot of that for me in my story it was grounded in shame. I would act out, feel so much shame that the only thing that made it go away was acting out again. It was never about the acting out. It was making the shame piece, the shame feeling go away. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I love what you said too, Ashley, just like about, I think there's different phases for different people based off their background and story. But for us, there was a denial piece for him. And then there was a denial for me, realizing like, because I even have women who I'm coaching with and talking with, and they're like, I see a therapist, but I don't go to a group, or I see a therapist, but I don't want to subscribe to this podcast, because then it's accepting the fact that this is my life, and there's just this like, you're just trying to hold on to it. You're trying to control, the process. You're trying to control your relationship and what's going to end up happening. And I believe that the sooner that you can let go and you can accept, like you were talking about, this is a journey, this is a process, and this is our new normal. And it doesn't have to suck. It can be even greater. It can be even better. But I believe that healing is going to look completely different once you just let go and you accept the process, and you stop fighting it. You stop fighting that he has to go to group. You stop fighting that you have to go to group. You stop fighting the financial aspect of it, because it is financially expensive if you're seeing a therapist, if you're buying books, if you're diving deep into healing. But you just let go and you go, this is what it's going to look like to save my marriage, to restore my marriage, and to have a completely different life. And that's what you guys have done. I mean, that is so amazing to see where you guys were, and God's hand is so beautifully just woven into each one of you individually and then together, and then see where you guys are at today. I mean, we had talked briefly, and I remember just hearing you guys talk about your involvement with Pure Desires and being on the board and, being in groups. I mean, you guys are totally not just there and leaving now. You guys are really letting God use your story to help others. And I would love to just end the podcast with that. Just you guys sharing with us, what has sharing your guys' story done for you, your relationship, and for other people? Because I mean, you guys started a whole conference. That's a big deal.
Yeah, there was a moment 5-ish years ago, 6 maybe now, I don't remember, 5 or so years ago, where, paraphrasing, but it just kind of hit me. He was in recovery. He was doing Pure Desire. He was walking through all the things that, he needed to walk through for healing, and he was finding freedom. He was getting to the root of some of these issues. He was figuring out what was causing some of these things, pulling up things from his past that he had not thought about in a very, very long time, and was really like getting in touch with these issues and building relationships with other men that have also struggled. And that's a big piece too, is in the shame, I know, is building relationships with other men who are struggling too. And so it's the accountability piece, right? And so he was doing that, and I was still really angry. I was still really bitter, and I still didn't trust him. And so I started kind of walking through my own journey of healing and recovering. And what I found out, that even though I said it, early on, 17 years ago, you figure you out and get this under control and we will be fine. I realized that that's not true. He can figure himself out, and he can deal with his junk, and he can start finding healing and freedom, and he can totally turn around and do a complete 180 and be great. But I now need to deal with all the things that have happened. And if I'm going to stay in this marriage and we are going to thrive and be great, we need to create a new chapter. We can't, he can't just deal with him and we'll be fine, because then I'm not dealing with any of the stuff that's happened over the last however long. And truth be told, I have junk too. We all do. And so to work on that together, to be able to be so vulnerable and transparent with each other, with his struggles and my struggles and my mistrust and his triggers and all of these things, to be able to get to a point where we can be really honest and unveiled about where we're at, that's something that needed to happen. And so I found my own kind of healing and recovery through support and other women in groups. And I've also led groups, like you said, Pure Desire has stuff for everybody, all ages and all male, female, whatever.
Love that. And I think, it's so cool to hear you guys talk about the more piece of, we talk about restored to more. It's not restored to back to how it was, where there's a bunch of lies and a bunch of dishonesty and a bunch of, hey, we'll just kind of cover it up, but it's being restored to more for a greater purpose. We'd love to hear more about Unveiled. Talk to us about that. What does that look like today, and how is that transformed, and what's going on right now with all that?
Yeah. So when we got to a place in our healing process where we were committed to each other in our marriage, and we just knew that this was a part of our story, we knew that if we were struggling with this specifically, there are countless other couples struggling with it too, especially in the church. And I was actually just listening to something this week. The statistics are staggering about leadership and pastors who struggle with sex and pornography addiction. And that's why it's never talked about. And so we knew that this was not a culture that we wanted to continue to rest in church. And he was serving on the deacon board, and I was serving in a women's ministry leader. I was the director of the ministry at the church that we attend. And we knew that we had a lot to lose if we stepped out and said, here's all the cards on the table. This is what's going on. This is what we're dealing with. So we knew that as long as we were united and we knew that we wanted to help other people, because there was other people dealing with this, we knew there were, that it didn't matter. And so I asked him, I said, as soon as we start sharing our story, as soon as you start leading these groups and you start sharing your story, and I start reaching out to women, and I start This Story is Unveiled, and I start sharing my story and our story together, not only is the enemy going to attack us hard, but we might start getting pushback. There's fallout that's going to come from this. And we have seen fallout, not at our church, thankfully. Our church has been really incredible, very supportive and incredible. But we have seen fallout in our personal lives because of it. And but we knew that there's a greater purpose, and this is kingdom work, and it's more important. And so we made a pact, it doesn't matter. This is what God wants us to do. He wants to use our story. And so we just started sharing it. And in that, I have this holy discontent for what I was hearing from women when I would share our story and my own, upbringing story and young adult story. The amount of women that I had been walking alongside with in small groups and meeting for coffee, and I had been friends with, the amount of women that came to me and said, this is my story too, or something similar. Maybe their husband didn't struggle with pornography. Maybe they just had trauma in their childhood. Maybe it had nothing to do with sex addiction whatsoever, but I've always been so drawn to stories. I've always known everybody's got junk. Everybody's got a story, but it never hit me so hard as it did in this season a handful of years ago, when women that I had been walking alongside with, couples that we had been doing small group with, that you learn these deep, dark secrets that nobody ever tells. That I'm just like, why do we feel the need to pretend like we're wrapped in this pretty bow and our families are perfect and our spouses are perfect and our lives are perfect? It bothered me. And so I just prayed and I talked to Asher and I was like, what do I do with this? Because I'm not okay with it. People need to, women especially, I feel like, especially in my role as somebody who's married to someone who has struggled with porn and sex addiction, is you don't want to ever throw your husband under the bus. Sometimes you might want to. But as a whole,
you're going.
Yeah. There's the bus. We're just gonna throw you under it. But I mean, like, let's be honest. If we're committed to the marriage and we're committed to trying to find healing together, you're not trying to paint your husband in a bad light. You don't want people to think that he's a pervert. You don't want people to think that he's broken, or that whatever, that everything is unraveling at the seams, even though it might be. You don't want people to know that, and you don't want people to think poorly of who you would be talking about. So we keep it here. And I found that with any story, even if it's not addiction, somebody lost a child, people just keep their stories here in fear of what others might say, or if they speak it out, it makes it real, or there's a plethora of reasons why people don't share their stories. But what I was learning is that it is so incredibly important. It's God's work to do it. Jesus spoke in stories, and he came to redeem, and he can redeem anything. And so, Stories Unveiled just started with me being on staff, me talking to him and just saying, how would you feel about this? Starting with women, we'd love to get into a men's conference right now. Women is all that we're doing at the moment, but started with in 2018. First women's conference had 200 women, and there was 5 women that shared their stories, and we had one woman teach. She came from another state and friend of a friend, and she came and taught, and we had live worship, and it was just so simple. And that was the model that I wanted, was simple. I just wanted real women on the stage sharing their stories in all different realms. It's not all about sex addiction. It's so insecurity, loss, forgiveness, healing. I mean, absolutely anything. It's any story. And just real women sharing their stories. And it's not an impromptu open mic. They're all chosen beforehand and all of that. But there's so many stories, and it's your story and it's my story. And anybody that listens can place themselves in it because it's real. They're not paid. They're not, it's not fabricated. It's all just very real. And we always do have teaching, because I feel like that's really important to bring it back to why God says this is important for us to share our stories and the redemption piece. And there's always an opportunity for those that don't know the Lord to give their lives to the Lord. And we've done this every year. In year 1, I didn't know that we would do it again. I just out of obedience was like, okay. And I asked 5 of my closest friends, hey, I know your story. Would you want to share it? And they did. And year 2, God said, do it again. So we did. And we packed a what's it called?
Auditorium?
No,
Theater?
Oh my gosh, the ballroom. We packed a ballroom at Boise State University.
Wow.
And we sold out, and every year God's just kept saying, do it again. And so we made a thing of it. And so, every year we hold a conference. Like I said, so far just for women, but we would love to try and figure out how to make a male event, Stories Unveiled, whether it was under the branch of something else, being called something else. But it's an opportunity for women to get real, share their stories of hope and freedom, really, at the end of the day. I mean, whether there's healing or forgiveness or whatever, really at the end of every single story that is shared, there's always hope and there's always freedom at the end of every story. There's always teaching. And this year we're doing it again in Boise. And so we're super excited, and we have some amazing stories and incredible speakers, because I just feel so strongly that stories matter and they change lives and they bring freedom. The minute you shine a light on the sin or the hurt or the pain or whatever it is, the minute you shine the light on it, it doesn't have power anymore. And the more we talk about it, the more we can process it, and the more we can give it to God, and He can do anything with our stories.
So good. Are their tickets still open for this year's conference?
There are, yeah.
How do they get them? When are the dates? I'm going. I already have one, but for listeners.
You do already have a ticket. Yay.
So excited. So yeah.
The event is September 18th. It's a Saturday. Doors open at 9 a.m. Conference starts at 10, but you will want to get there early because we have some incredible vendors. Tickets are on sale at storiesunveiledconference.com. It's a mouthful, but storiesunveiledconference.com.
It'll be in the show notes as well. So
awesome. Tickets are still on sale. We have a couple different kinds of tickets. We do have a VIP ticket, which includes lunch and a really special gift from a sponsored partner that we have that is a local business here who also has an incredible story. There is a general admission ticket that does not include lunch. And then there's a virtual ticket for anybody that either can't or doesn't want to personally join us. When we had to go virtual last year because of COVID, we did a virtual event. We realized that it was so invaluable to have that virtual aspect. We had never done it before, even though we very much missed being in person. And what we do is it's so powerful to be there in real time. We were in way more states and 2 countries going virtual. And so we realized it was actually really important to have that virtual aspect. So there's a virtual ticket as well if you just want to be able to log in on the day of and watch it that way too. So
that's awesome.
So cool.
Well, Asher and Ashley, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thanks for carving out time, you guys. And really thank you for being a couple that has become restored to more, that is inspiring other people to come and share the things that shame is maybe not letting them share, and the things that they think, man, am I ever going to be okay if I share this? I just feel like you guys are an example and you're an inspiration to so many others. And we just want to thank you for all that you've done. And really, of course, thank Jesus for what He's done in your relationship. I know you guys give Him all the glory, and it is really cool to see His work in you and through you big time.
Definitely. Well, thank you for having us on and allowing us to share our story to your listeners as well.
Yeah, thank you.